There we go.
You can't just turn one room.
Well, welcome everyone to Bible study today. The third Wednesday in Lent. So exciting.
Where does the time go?
Oh, I know. We'll be done with Lent as soon as we begin it. But I think the important thing is as we go through Lent, it's that intentional time, that we have to work on some Lenten practices that we want to do. If we want to pray more, we can do that a little bit more. If we want to go to church a little bit more, we can do that. I mean, there's a lot of different things that we can do to work on, and it's just intentional time. It's your intentional time that you can do. We have an extra worship service during the week.
Devotions?
Yeah, devotions.
You did.
Yeah.
Are you at the Care
Karen's one.
tomorrow?
Mm-hmm. We'll be at the Care Center tomorrow, so I'll have 4 services this week. So I'm excited. So, sure.
The devotion that you handed out, or
Yes.
was handed out for Lent,
Yes.
and it talks about 150 years of being a church here.
Yeah.
Now, was that something that was available, or
You
is
can
it
still
something
get
you had
it.
to create?
That I created that.
You created it.
I created it.
Wow.
And if you want it, I got plenty more. So.
No, we have one.
Yeah.
No, what happened is the ELCA website stopped allowing me to look at daily Bible readings.
Mm.
I have no idea. It's
They
been
gonna
about-
charge you now?
No, but for 4 days I haven't been, I go to it, and it hasn't changed. It's still the same verse
Yeah.
that it was,
Either that or they're out of town right now and they just don't know, anybody else knows how to.
Well, I mean, after 4 days, you would think they would catch on that it's not working.
Well, no,
you know.
they might just say until the person comes back.
So
then-
Randy said, well, here, we have this whole packet,
There
so
we go.
that's my fallback.
And you have a lot
For
of.
daily devotion.
Is
Well,
that?
there was no Facebook yesterday.
Yeah, Facebook, I thought my phone was gone.
I would guess if there's one person that's responsible for it and they're.
But you would think they would catch it.
Vacation, but who? If nobody else takes care of it,
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
and
yeah.
that person's sick or on
Yeah.
vacation,
Yep.
nobody else is.
But it's a vital service, and it's crashed.
They need a substitute.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I
They
mean,
need,
like,
they need a plan.
there's a lot of people that depend probably on that,
Mm-hmm. So one question I had before we get started today: does anybody know if we have a time capsule on the property? Because I was talking to who was it? I was talking to Irene last night,
There is.
and they said there's a time capsule here.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Does anybody know where it's at?
Well, isn't it in the
I
cornerstone?
was gonna say, I think it's behind the
That's
It's in the
where-
cornerstone.
where I thought.
I don't know how you
Okay.
take the cornerstone out, but,
But I think that's where it is.
yeah,
Okay,
because I heard that years ago.
okay. So it's in the cornerstone, but yeah, I don't know how we're gonna get that
It was
out.
encapsulated somehow.
Okay,
The one that did it died. His wife is still living.
okay.
But there must be a way to add
Who's
it.
that?
Well, unless you have to take the wall
Who's
apart.
that?
Behind the cornerstone, is that where the Schneiders
Swanson.
have theirs?
He lived in Hammond, but his wife was Abilene Swanson.
Okay.
Maybe they put it there, where they built the building.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm thinking too. Because I was thinking one of the things we could do for our 150th year is put in a time capsule, but make it accessible for other people to get at later. But then I was talking to Irene last night, and she was like, "Oh yeah, there's already a time capsule there." I'm like, "No, I didn't know that." So
Marvel might know too, but I'm pretty sure that's where it is, it's
I
Cornerstone.
mean, generally, after a certain point of time, you
There was a
take out the time capsule, don't you?
Right.
And look at what's in there,
yeah,
and maybe you add to it or whatever.
yeah.
Did that.
That's what I was thinking. If it was easy to get at,
Yeah.
but if it's in the building, I don't want to rip the building open. So.
A $50,000 project.
Right, for $5 worth of stuff in there. So I'm like, yeah.
They should have let that.
Well, that's a decision. Like, what do you put in a time capsule? Somebody had to decide
Yeah.
what was important.
So if anybody,
So there is one.
there is one. So
How
it's
you
a,
get to it is a whole other question.
we'll have to talk about how we're gonna get to it. So
Just bring your sledgehammer from home.
yeah,
Nobody does a sledgehammer anymore, I bet.
So
Find one in our garage.
Otherwise, somebody could drill a hole in there with the cement.
Nobody would
glue
do
it,
the physical labor.
camera.
oh, that's true too.
I mean, I've actually got one of those.
Maybe we'll do that.
Maybe
So
first we should have a scavenger hunt and look over the whole building.
exactly, I think it'd be fun. We're finally like, oh, I didn't know that was still there.
But they're typically put in the cornerstone.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of a given.
existed.
Exactly. So as we just think about our 150th, I was thinking about doing that. And as we get into our lesson for today, so the first part of the lesson is in all the other synoptic gospels. So what are the synoptic gospels again? Can you give it to me?
Matthew, Mark, and Luke.
Matthew, Mark, and Luke. John's the odd person out. So in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, this first part of the story, so verses like, let's see, 28 through,
44.
well, no, not the whole thing, but
34.
34. So 28 to 34 is represented in the other synoptic gospels, but they're put in at different times. So what's sort of the context for today in terms of this particular story happening? What has been going on? What has been going on with Jesus and the establishment right now the last couple weeks?
They're testing him.
Correct.
For challenging.
Yep, they're challenging Jesus, they're testing Jesus. And so you have this, so today is the end of the sort of 5 sort of challenges to Jesus. So this is, so that's where Mark puts this particular text in. So this is a time after Jesus has been challenged by the leadership and local folks. And so this is the ending story. Also, the part from 41 to 44 is actually one of the last teachings from Jesus before he goes to the cross. So 41 to 44 is the last teaching that Jesus in the book of Mark has before he goes on the cross. So you're getting a couple big ticket items happening this week. You have Jesus sort of that, so you have sort of a summation of Jesus and the authorities. So that's been summed up in here. So you sort of see the tail end of the argument. And you also have the last teaching of Jesus in Mark. So this is what's going through the text for today. So, so any questions about that? And like I said, Luke and Matthew use something a little different as to where they end that. Where they talk about the greatest command. So I'm trying to see if I can. Okay, so in the Lukean parallel, so this verse appears after the Sadducees questioned Jesus, so it's found in Luke 20:40. In Matthew, it follows Jesus' question to the Pharisees about how Christ can be David's son, establishing a Matthean series of 5 questions. So again, you can sort of see there's a difference. So in the Matthean text, this actually starts the argument with the authorities. In the Mark text, it ends that talk, the discussion with the authorities. So you can sort of see the difference in where it's placed. So, okay.
I have a question.
Yeah.
What's the definition of synoptic?
Similar.
Similar?
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Well, simpler than you thought, wasn't it?
Yeah, it just means similar. And then what's the reason again, do you think, that why are Matthew, Mark, and Luke called the Synoptic Gospels?
Because they're similar.
That's what I was gonna say.
That's what I was going to say too.
They are similar. So why are they similar? There's a reason why they're
Do
similar.
you think because they read each other's gospel, and then they had the advantage of seeing or hearing the other person's gospel? So they
Yeah,
could fill in missing
Or they
holes?
were
Or,
together.
correct.
and they're writing to different audiences, but
Just that they cover the same.
Right. So basically, so tradition says that Mark was written first. Now, I'm saying tradition says because we don't know. Because last night during Bible study for the clergy, John was like, "Oh yeah, do you know John was written first?" I said, "There's no way John was written first." But I mean, that's a theory.
And
John.
that was our argument.
No, we didn't argue about it. But I was just like, we're like, where did you find that? Because so tradition says. So there's as you all know, there's always an argument about everything in the Bible, because that's how faith works. So then you have Mark was written first, and then Luke and Matthew were written around the same times, and they used Mark as sort of a guidepost.
It's basically within the same time frame as years wise.
Mark was written a couple of years earlier, and so about 10 to 20 years earlier, I want to say. But again,
How about the other two?
so if you say, Don, you got to help me with this. I think it's 60 A.D. is for Mark. Do you remember? So I think it's around 60 A.D. and then I want to say that
So they probably weren't comparing notes, in other words.
Matthew and Luke were probably written around the same time, about 70 to 80
Okay.
A.D. And then John traditionally is written around 100.
Yeah, the authorship is 55 to 65. You said
Yeah,
60, so that's
60.
right in the middle.
Yeah.
So that's good.
Mine says 50 to 60.
Okay. Because I'm trying to remember, because that Mark, so traditionally Mark is written earlier, so 50, 60, and then Matthew and Luke, sometimes I want to say it's 60 to 80, I think is the range that they use for Matthew and Luke.
It's amazing how all this stuff gets passed down.
Right, and so you have sort of so the other two gospel writers had Mark as a book to read, or as a scroll to read, and they took notes from that and were like, okay, yeah, I liked what Mark said here, but it really didn't happen this way. I always think have you ever seen the movie Clue? Mm-hmm. I always look at like the alternate endings, but it happened this way, or is it? But what if it happened like this? And so I look at Luke and Matthew as sort of going, okay, we agree, Mark, with you that this happened, but it didn't happen here. It happened over here.
Yeah. Or I often thought that Mark being short, well, the other one said, well, Mark, why didn't you write about this?
Mm-hmm.
Or, you know, that's right, Mark, but why didn't you go into more detail on this?
Correct. Yeah. And then
But the point is that they had the advantage of reading.
correct. And then there also was a source called Q, which was a sayings of Jesus.
Q?
Q. So that's the German. That's what the German source, or the Germans call it Q, and so that's
Because
what.
there's
Koala or
the
something?
conspiracy,
Yeah.
the conspiracy
Oh, yeah.
thing, Q.
Oh,
Letter.
yeah. It's
Yeah, it's, yeah, you know.
So it's so-
it goes
so-
around, yeah.
so this is so there is another document. So they're saying that Matthew and Luke had this document that they label Q, and then also Mark. And between the two, they came up with their stories. But there's also differences between Luke and Matthew, so they didn't pick the same stuff. So,
And you also have perspectives.
Mhm.
You know, even if John and Matthew and Mark were, Matthew, and,
Luke.
well, no, because Mark and Luke were neither one disciples.
Mhm.
I mean, they were followers, they were disciples, but not the 12. But they wrote for Peter or for, but you have different perspectives too.
correct. Yeah.
And they weren't always in the situation at the same time.
Right.
It might have been, I can write about this because I was there that day. You weren't, so you're not gonna be able to write about it.
Exactly.
And just, if you were there at the same time, perspective.
Or you just remember it differently.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, just how many times.
Or they're trying to explain it in a way the audience would understand.
Yeah.
So if it's for a Jewish audience, they're going to include Jewish traditions and stuff
Correct.
that they would understand. You know.
Yeah.
And if it's for Gentiles, they'd probably leave that out because it wouldn't mean anything to
Yeah.
Gentiles. Right.
Yep. so that's sort of so as we read through. So a lot of times, I know in seminary, I was like, why do we have to do the other? I said, I know Mark, so why do I have to do anything else? And this is the reason why, because they're not all the same. A lot of people think, well, I read Mark, so I know what Matthew and Luke is. No, they all have different perspectives. They all have different stories. They order stuff different as well too, and so it's important to see why they do those things. So just because they sound similar doesn't mean that they're the same account. So I think that's one trap, I know for me, that I fell into, was like, oh, they sound close enough, I don't need to read the other ones. No, you need to read the other ones because they're different. They're similar, but different. So, and then John's a whole different beast. So,
Well, maybe I'm wrong, but I've always assumed that the Synoptic Gospels were the three that tried to put a synopsis or a shortened version of Jesus' life.
right.
And John doesn't do that.
No, he doesn't.
John is longer.
Yes. John is, well, so the other thing you have to take in consideration too is John was written during the Gnostic period when there was a lot of Gnosticism going on. So Gnosticism was a field of thought that was like, it was really imperative to understand the secret. Gnosticism is all about secrets. If you understand the secrets, then you are in on it. You know, you are one of the chosen ones who know what's going on. And so John gets accused of Gnosticism a lot. That's debatable. But so that was who John was. He was in some sense writing against the Gnosticism that was happening at that particular time. And so which is why we assume it's more in the hundreds was when he wrote it versus earlier, because of Gnosticism didn't turn up till a lot later after Jesus. So
John just tries to explain who Jesus is.
correct.
He doesn't try to include all these details about his life, but the parts that show that the signs that show that he's the Son of God, and he just tries to explain to his audience that Jesus is the Son of God.
Correct. Yep. Absolutely.
Well, in John, it says, John probably wrote this book in the late 60s to the early 90s. Well, that's a 30-year gap.
You know,
That's a big, like, well,
that's like how I write my sermons. I write my sermons, between 2024 and 2026, so it happens somewhere in there.
World War II occurred between 1920 and 1960.
There you go.
You know?
That's how it works. So yeah, you gotta take it with a grain of salt. So, all right. Well, let's. Did that answer the question? So so just as you read through this, just know, it's similar to some of the other accounts. So if it sounds familiar, it might be coming out of one of the other synoptics. So like the text for today, it'll sound familiar, but it's different. So who would like to read 28 through, let's see, how about 34? 28 through 34.
One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating. Noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer, he asked him, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" "The most important one," answered Jesus, "is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this. Love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." Did I go too?
No, keep going.
Keep going. "Well," said the teacher. Well said, teacher," the man replied. "You are right in saying that God is one and there is no other but him. But to love him with all your heart, with all your understanding, with all your strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself is more important than all burnt offerings and sacrifices." When Jesus saw that he had answered wisely, he said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of God." And from then on, no one dared ask him any more questions.
Okay. And then how about 35 through 40?
While Jesus was teaching in the temple courts, he asked, "Why do the teachers of the law say that the Messiah is the son of David?" David himself, speaking by the Holy Spirit, declared, "The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet." David himself calls him Lord. How then can he be his son? The large crowd listened to him with delight. As he taught, Jesus said, "Watch out for the teachers of the law. They like to walk around in flowing robes and be greeted with respect in the marketplaces, and have the most important seats in the synagogues and the places of honor at banquets. They devour widows' houses, and for a show make lengthy prayers. These men will be punished most severely."
And then 41 through 44.
And he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the multitude putting money into the treasury. Many rich people put in large sums, and a poor widow came and put in 2 copper coins, which make a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the treasury. For they all contributed out of their abundance. But she, out of her poverty, has put in everything she had, her whole living."
There you go.
The one that I read reminds me of what I just told you this morning about people can be covered with tattoos and they can be very nice people.
Oh, yeah.
But people that, well, now what did I say? That went to
The church are too judgmental.
the what?
That go to church are too judgmental.
Yeah, the judgmental people
Yeah.
are people that are in church every Sunday.
Yep.
And that's very much what these leaders were.
Yeah. The leaders are very judgmental. Yes, exactly.
People who are de-churching or unchurched think that Christians are hypocrites.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right, and that's,
Just like
Judging
a friend
others
of
on-
mine tells their neighbors, both arms were just covered.
Yeah.
But he was a really nice guy.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like I said, I think that's so I think Jesus would like us to see each other a little differently, and this is hard, especially because what's coming up in November.
The election.
The election. So, it's pretty funny that we're going to talk about love your neighbor as yourself. So that's going to be that's going to be fun this time of year. So I think that's
Basic civility is just going out the window.
I know, but we're asked as Christians to restore it. We're asked to love our neighbors. So it's one thing before we dive too much deeper into that particular piece of it. I want to start off with something that in the other texts, in the Luke and Matthew text, this first part is not in the text. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. It's traditional. It's a traditional Jewish, I don't know, liturgy type of thing. It's something that our Jewish brothers and sisters say all the time. It was out of Deuteronomy, if I remember correctly.
6:4.
Yep, there we go. And so this was something that they would say. It's a reminder that the Lord is one, the Lord is their God. And it's about listening. So when Jesus is saying that, it's in some sense the Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. That is sort of a liturgical way of getting people to say, okay, we need to listen to what's going to happen next. What's happening with God? What is God wanting us to do? And so I think it's important that Jesus starts with that. And if you read the other text, the Matthew and the Luke text, you won't see this. But in this particular text, Mark is trying to reinforce to his audience that Jesus really wants them to, and this has been something that's been passed down, Jesus really wants them to listen to this. You know, the guy asked him, well, what's the best commandment of all? And Jesus is like, okay, well, this is what God would say. And he also noticed that Jesus didn't stop at one, you know. And in some sense, the two flow together pretty well. You can say it as one commandment, but Jesus is like, Lord, love your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. and interesting enough, in Deuteronomy too, you don't hear the mind part. It's love the Lord with all your heart and your soul, but mind isn't included. And so the reason for that is the Hebrews thought that your thoughts came from your heart. And so, but Mark also knew people other than Jews would be hearing this. And so that's why he included mind. So you have heart. So
Those 2 commandments summarize the 10.
yeah.
The first 3 are about God, and then the last 7 are about others.
And there's also something that's really critical with what Jesus says in this, that in order to show love to God, what do you need to do?
Love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor. So Jesus is asking people more than, okay, if you just believe this stuff, you're fine. Jesus is asking them instead, you need to go from just believing to doing. And so the Christian faith, at least the way that Jesus is explaining it, and it's often called the way, back before we were called Christians, it was called following the way, is about action. It's more than just thinking about it, it's actually doing stuff, which is the reason why we're working on a 5-year plan so that we can do stuff, because that's what Jesus is commanding us to do. So I think that's something that we're really going to strike home with it. And actually, that last part, the last teaching of Jesus, actually embraces this first part that Jesus is talking about. So how does the widow's mite, which is what it's traditionally called, how does that change? How does that tie into what Jesus is talking here? Because this is the visual aid example for us, is this last story where so it has to do with the widow. So how do those two tie together?
The widow gives all she has. We are supposed to give all we
The love
have
of
to
God,
God. Yeah.
neighbors.
Right.
With all your heart and all your soul.
So then the question is, does God want us to be poor?
I knew you were gonna bring that up.
Yeah. Does God want us to be poor?
No. But he wants us to put our focus on something other than ourselves, put our focus on others.
Right.
Don't hoard our money just because we can.
Mm-hmm.
Even the idea of tithing, it's only 10%,
Right.
90%.
Yeah. So
Well, it's about doing things for show.
Mm-hmm.
The Pharisees,
Right.
Sadducees, doing
Yep.
things for show,
Yep.
saying all these flowery words but not really meaning it. People who have a lot of money, they think it looks like they're giving a lot, but really in the whole
Scheme of
scheme of
things.
things,
Yeah,
it's
yeah, a lot.
a
It
pittance, yeah.
reminds me of the people that, I don't know what the story is, but go up in front of the church and are wailing and putting on a show, and then this other person just comes and stands in the back and says,
Okay, now we'll
have,
sit so close to the front.
have mercy.
What, it's go into a
He
closet?
just says, have mercy on me, or
Yep.
something like that. I don't know exactly what that is. It reminds me of that.
Yeah. So I think the teaching, Gene's sort of hit it right on the head there. How do we the action? So in some sense, the woman. We had a great conversation in the clergy discussion of this is there because I won't name the pastor who said, well, we're not supposed to be poor. I said, I get that. And at the same time, I'm like, but we don't know the rest of the story. They're like, Jesus doesn't want us to give up everything for, so that, we can't function. And I'm like, that's not, and I would argue that this particular story, I would say afterwards, I bet Jesus did something for this lady, or some other followers of his did something for this lady. Or how do we know that God didn't take care of her after this. We just make the assumption that she gave everything and, well, do that, but we don't have that expectation that God would honor God's promises and take care of that particular person. Because if you read the Lord's Prayer pretty closely, give us this day our daily bread, God will provide.
And he doesn't tell us if the people that put large sums of money in there ever changed
Yeah.
either.
Correct. Yeah, we don't know.
I wonder if she could have been one of the widows that was mentioned in Acts, where Stephen and the others were commissioned to take care of those.
Yep.
So here you have blatant examples of people who are doing things for show.
Correct.
But I say that in our lives, it's a battle over selfishness
Mm-hmm.
in our own heart. When we, the battle over not blatant things like this, but just day to day, as you live your life, keeping your ego out of it, keeping what you want out of it. I mean, it's just a struggle every day with your selfishness, because you can err towards doing more like Christ would want you to, but then you kind of slip back
Right.
into your own way. We're talking about sin here, but
Correct.
but
Correct.
but selfishness. I mean,
Yeah.
and then we live in a society that says, well, you gotta have that, and you gotta have that, and you're not a whole person if you don't have this. I mean, that type of thing.
Or even the showiness of it, like, I did that for you.
Correct.
I did that for you,
Correct.
So
Yeah.
that's the struggle for me. Is this? I don't know how other people feel, but
Well, putting God first, you have
Yeah.
all
Correct.
these, not priorities, but necessities, or
Mhm.
this has to be done, or, but, for me, I have to put God first,
Mhm.
but that doesn't always mean monetary.
Correct. Because what is God? So what is Jesus saying in here that God really wants for us to do? What's the most important thing in God's eyes?
love,
Honor him.
Right.
Of one another.
Love one another,
and taking care of your neighbor.
taking care of your neighbor. Is it the words that God wants?
Oh, no.
Try to do as Jesus
is
did.
it more a mindset?
No, I wouldn't say mindset. God wants you to put your money where your mouth is. God wants you to do what you said you're going to do. If you're going to be a Christ follower, you need to not tell me about it. You need to show me. And I think as a Christian church right now, I know I'll get in trouble for saying this, but I think we do a lot of stuff for show. We talk a good game, but we don't do a good game. We don't put our actions behind what we need to do. And so I think if you want to know why the church is doing so poorly, it's because we tell everybody about Jesus. We don't show people Jesus. I think of all those people, so my kids were telling me about a lady that comes to Eau Claire and just preaches at the kids every day and tells them they're going to hell for whatever particular reason.
Just outside on the.
Yeah, just on the sidewalk,
It's her
people goes
form
by.
of witnessing,
Yeah,
right?
that's her form of witnessing. And I'm like, and we had the same thing when I went to, we call them the Pentecost preachers because they're on the Pentecost for Iowa. There's 5 buildings there. And so we would hear it all the time about going to hell and stuff like that. And I was like, but what are you really doing? I mean, you can tell me your opinion all you want, and are you really gonna change somebody's, what they're doing? What if you guys instead would do some type of outreach? What if you would help provide like free sweaters for people or free scarves? Or what if you actually took an interest in people's lives and said, hey, how can I walk alongside you? That's going to make 10,000 more times difference than simply just preaching at somebody and going, hey.
That's true.
But we don't do that. Lutherans especially were bad at this.
Had LAX,
Yeah.
who believe the people that
Oh yeah.
you meet.
Yeah, so I think what Jesus is really asking us in this particular text, which really fits us well right now, is what are we going to do for our 5-year plan? What are we doing to show God's love? Not just preach about it, but what are we doing to show God's love? And I think that's what we need to do in our lives as well too. How are we showing people God's love? And that gets back to what you're talking about in terms of selfishness too. I mean, because there's certain things that we will do and certain things we won't do. And we need to ask ourselves, well, why am I not doing this? Or why am I doing this? Or, and again, there was some debate within the commentaries about this, but love your neighbor as yourself. So you're supposed to have self-love, because if you don't love yourself, you can't pass that love on other people. But at the same time, you have to think of, okay, well, in general, people don't have too much of a problem with self-love. There's people that do have problems with that, but overall, it gets you to that point again. So how do you treat other people? How do you work with other people? And it's a very hard thing, especially as a Christian too, because you're going to be talking to people. Let's just do politics right now. You're going to have somebody from the opposite political spectrum than you are. This coming this coming election year, it's going to be a family member. It's going to be a friend, total stranger. It could be they're going to make you mad. They're going to put some stuff on Facebook or Twitter or and it's going to make you angry. And you're going to be like, why do I even listen to them? Why am I even a friend with them? And then I want you to think of this verse. Love your neighbor as yourself. What is that actually asking you to do? It's not saying agree with them. It doesn't say agree with your neighbor as you agree with yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. How would it look this election season if we did that? And think about your own responses to this too. What would it mean to say, I know one of the clergy that I was with was like, they asked their congregation not to post any political things on social media or really think about it, because he said, the last time they had this, they had several people who left their church because of the social media posts. And so, and so how do you love your neighbor?
This is probably not similar at all, but the book that we discussed a few weeks ago in Forum, The Great Dechurching, some of you were at that and all. One of the startling pieces of information that was in that book was that 21% of people who say they're Christians get their church from TV. They don't go to church. They don't have a corporate worship with other people together. So how are you supposed to love them? Because you're going like, well, if you don't share your faith with other Christians, if you just watch TV at home, that's not what faith is all about. And that's just a really troubling statistic to me that and they're happy, they're fine with that, but our faith calls upon us to interact with each other and care about each other and all that. If you never see them,
right?
It's hard to do. So, but again, kind of love one another. Well, I'm going like, this is pretty startling statistic, but I'm supposed to understand that,
But it's easier. So again, it comes back down to what Jesus is saying. It's not just about words, because if you say you're a Christian, great. I can watch a sermon on TV. I can, if I never interact with anybody, am I actually showing God's love? If I do not interact with them, if I just have the academic knowledge of who Jesus is and stuff like that, am I really being a Christian? I might believe that I might say I believe that Jesus is who he is, but Jesus continuously pushes us you need to show up. You need to do something. You're not really a Christian if you just say you are. You need to start doing stuff about it. You need to start, and that's why it's hard. That's why people drop away from the faith, because it's a lot easier for me to tell you how much Jesus loves you. It's a lot harder for me to do that when you're yelling at me, or stuff is going on in my life that's horrible, but yet I still take the time to say, I need to take the time and sit down with this person. You know, I want them to know how much God loves them, and I want this. You know, how do we talk and have a conversation about stuff? You know, when I could just have easily tell them to go to hell. That's the part that Jesus is really saying. If you're a Christian, and this is why we go to confession and forgiveness every week. We could do it more often too, but it's reminding us that we don't get it right all the time. But how do we keep moving in that direction that Jesus wants us to move? So.
But yeah, we shouldn't, just because we don't see those people gathering with us, we shouldn't assume that they're not giving or not
Correct.
participating.
Correct.
We don't really know them. I mean, we don't know,
We
right?
don't.
And then, one thing I would challenge us as a congregation to do is for all those people that are online for us, that come and watch worship online for us, that's great. We as a congregation should also be reaching out to them and saying, hey, how are you doing? You doing okay? It's great that you come every Sunday morning. We love you coming to online, and we just want to make sure you're doing okay. Can I come by and just talk to you? Can I talk to you on the phone? Can I send you a couple text messages? You know, I think that helps all of us come together. You know, whether they're online or they're in person, whether they're here, whether they're far. You know, the nice thing that the place where we're at in the world right now, you can talk to anybody through a myriad of different ways. But then why are we so lonely? Because no one takes the first step. And so we as Christians, we should be reaching out to people. Hey, how are you doing today? The selfish part of that is you don't really want to know. I mean, honestly, you know,
It takes your time and energy.
yeah, it takes your energy.
That's one thing that
And then-
Jehovah's Witnesses have over us.
And we're selfish,
Yeah,
and
we
we want
reach
that
out.
ourselves.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
do. They put themselves out there.
Yeah.
And they are judged and
Well, it's true
slimed.
that they go door to door and they talk to you, but why are they doing it? To save themselves?
Well,
I mean, okay, I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
do they really
Yeah.
care, or they're just doing it to save themselves? You know?
well, and then like I said, then what's you know, is it for them showing you Christ's expression of love, or are they doing it for a different purpose? I mean, that's
Yeah.
the biggest thing. So everything that you should do should be out of God's love for somebody else, and that's hard. That's going to be hard. So I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying that's why we practice every Sunday.
People knock at the door. I said I belong to a church. And
I never really did.
there isn't like a. I didn't say anything, guys. I said I
understand.
like talking to the wall.
Yeah. Sometimes they like to just talk about it. So.
Yeah.
But
What were you saying?
I guess I've never really understood Jehovah's Witnesses. I can remember when I was going back in the confirmations many moons ago, asking Pastor Anka about that. He flat told me, I really can't answer your question, what they believe in. Maybe that's not a good subject.
I know.
well, I think I think one of these times I think we're just because I got a nice sheet from Gary talking about all the different denominations, and so maybe that's one we'll just take some
Yeah.
time and do that. Maybe we'll do that once a week. Just take a denomination and say, hey, this is what they believe.
Because I think Jehovah's Witness that don't believe in any holidays.
I
You know.
don't.
Well, that's just
Oh,
one.
Easter, Christmas, you know.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember with that. I know we had to do something special with them for medicine. Their blood can't leave their body.
No
Really?
transfusion.
No transfusions.
Oh,
So when we had to do, so one of the tests that we do is a MUGA multi-gated acquisition. So where we actually have to tag the blood, make it radioactive. The blood could not leave them, so we had to have a long tube hooked onto them, so we could just
Wow.
do everything off of them and then give it right back to them. So nothing ever left them.
really?
Yeah,
Really?
yeah.
I'll be darned.
So, and I know with the with Jehovah's Witnesses as well too, is like when we did chaplain work for them, you couldn't go talk to them. You had to call one of their elders, and their elder would come and talk to them. So, yeah. So I thought that was interesting as well too. So, but as we're getting close to the end here, what's any other questions about the text for today? So I really want you to think this time around, how do you love your neighbor? What does that look like? Especially in the election year. I'm going to keep hammering that home because I don't want the last 4 years to be this 4 years. And I could hope for that as much as I want, but we need to take action because we're finding out today we need to take action to do this. So how do we take action not to have the same 4 years happen like before? You know?
We need to pray really bad. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, it's prayer, and it's also our demeanor too. You know, what is God asking us? How do we engage with conversation with people, and how do we maybe not engage in conversation with people too?
But the whole nation needs to turn back to Jesus Christ.
Yeah,
That's
there's-
what they need to do.
Yeah.
Period.
Amen.
Period. That would solve everything.
It would. Now the hard part is how do we begin to show people that, and it's going to go beyond us talking. So we're not going to be able. So the one thing we found out, especially from that forum last week too, we're not going to talk our way back into having people believe. That was never a good strategy of the Christian church. Just talking a good game. We need to show a good game. We need to play well.
And invite.
Invite people.
But the people that might be open to coming back to church are expecting to see outreach, you know, and not a duplication of what somebody else is doing,
Right.
but outreach,
Yeah.
you know. And so if you looked at that list of things that were options for our church, you know, some were outreach and some were projects,
Yeah.
you know. I don't think they care about projects, they care about,
Yeah, they want us to, so I want you to think about that, you know, and start talking about it. What can we do to show our neighbors our love? What would that look like? Even when they drive us nuts. Just like the people in church. I know there's somebody in church that drives you nuts. I know that for a fact. And how do you respond to them? You know?
Stay away.
Yeah, it could be staying away, or it could be maybe doing something a little different. Hey, how are you doing today?
And just be kind. You don't have
Yeah.
to be
Just
best
be kind.
friends. But
Right, just be
kindness
kind.
goes a long ways.
And you'd be surprised when you start talking to people and you don't have any expectations, but you just treat them well. Most of the time, not always, but most of the time I'm not going to lie to you and say every single time it works. It doesn't. But I mean, most of the time people respond with the same level of respect, or, you know, that's all you can do. So,
I don't know if this applies or not, but recently losing my husband, I guess I can't say how much it means when someone calls me or someone just says, "How are you doing today?" I mean, some days I don't talk to anybody unless I call my kids. And it really is nice when someone and I try to reach out. I do the best I can, but I'm getting old and I can hardly see anymore, but I'm trying. But it really means a lot when people reach out.
thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's and yeah, I think you're not alone in that too. I think a lot of people are that same way too. You know, what if someone would just call me? You know.
well, then you think nobody cares, right?
Right.
If nobody reaches out.
So then.
No, I don't think,
No, but I
always
mean-
think people don't care.
Right.
No.
But they get busy, I mean, they
Right.
all have their own lives, and I understand that, but it really is nice when someone
Absolutely.
just reaches out.
Absolutely. So what if we all? I'll take you for. I think Dixie, I'm gonna piggyback off that. I want you to take one person this week. You have
Share
the whole
phone
week.
numbers.
Yeah.
That would help.
You can share phone numbers,
I
but
can't call you, Dixie, because I don't have your phone number.
I want you to find one person this week and call them up and just ask them how they're doing. That's the whole. You can take it from wherever you are. You can just call up and ask them that question and hang off afterwards if you want. But I want you to take one person this week. Either call them up or visit them and say, "Hey, how are you doing?"
And you could have a great relationship with them.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be somebody you've had a
I
falling
do
out with.
want if you have a spouse, don't do it with your spouse.
Well, even a card, you don't hear information.
Right.
They can't call you.
They got a card.
For this thing, I want you still to talk to each other.
That was a big deal.
Yeah.
I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I'm sure Wally and Louise can probably agree with me, that it really means something if people reach out.
Exactly.
Well, I got